Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and I have the wrong thumbnail behind me, of course, but that's okay. We can change that right now. Bam! There we are. That's the right one. And I am very pleased to have Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Newswire on. I've been itching to get him on over the past 6 months. So much going down in the Middle East, so much not covered at all in this country, and when it is, it's spun in such a manner that the majority of us here have no idea what's really going on in Syria and the rest of Eurasia. Today we're talking about what? A peace agreement, finally, after almost 2 decades of war in Afghanistan, but not much else. We're certainly not talking about the numerous videos of forces that are essentially wearing ISIS patches and working against the Syrian government, calling mothers of those they've beheaded, torturing people in the back of car seats, and so much more. So it's my pleasure to have Patrick Henningsen with me. Patrick, how are you?
I'm very good. Great to be with you, Jason.
Excellent. So right now, why don't you break down what's going on in Syria? Because the public here, the last thing that they heard about Syria was Trump had abandoned the Kurds, and it was the worst thing ever. But that's it. That's the last thing we've really gotten in that region. People don't realize there's a very serious situation continuing there, and that our military presence is not helping that matter.
Sure. Yeah. Every time the Syrian army makes a major offensive with their Russian allies to retake the northwest province of Idlib, which is just positioned just northwest of the city of Aleppo, right on the Turkish border. This is the last major stronghold of the sort of, array of terrorist factions that have all been pushed into this last major stronghold. So this is a really important strategic part of Syria. Once Idlib, this little province, is cleaned up, then it will free up resources for the Syrian army to go and redeploy in other areas. And of course, the areas where the United States is also occupying oil fields in northeastern Syria and other parts of the border regions that have been previously unsecured. So the United States, of course, gets interested, and then you see all the images of children on the news whenever these offensives happen. And so Turkey is playing a very complicated game. They've been feeding, grooming, arming, supporting all of the rebel factions since 2011. It's been 9 years now. And so they've deputized them. They've taken the Free Syrian Army and rebranded them and put them under the wing of the Turkish military. And of course, this is very confusing because if they get hit in airstrikes by Russian or Syrian Air Force, then Turkey will claim that our troops have been hit when in fact they're not Turkish troops. They've just been deputized as Turkish troops, mixed in with possibly Turkish special forces or commanders and so forth. So it's like an ultimate casus belli. And so it's a hugely problematic. And so Turkey's now kind of said that Syria crossed this red line and claimed that there were a couple of weeks ago 9 odd Turkish soldiers that were killed, and President Erdogan vowed revenge, that he's going to now attack the Syrian army directly. Before there's been a ceasefire agreement that was put into place in 2019. This is what the Sochi conference was that Russia was sponsoring, bringing all the different stakeholders together. The United States was not involved in any of that. And so that's all broken down now. Turkey was supposed to separate the jihadi terrorists from the, quote, moderate rebels. In reality, there's no difference. So that's neither here nor there. But, just going through the motions, they didn't even bother making it look official. So what Turkey is trying to do is, I think, to establish their influence in these areas like Afrin, which is next to Idlib and Jarbalus, all along the border, to imbue Turkish influence in these areas, and bring in Turkish telecoms companies, run Turkish power lines in, provide Turkish aid. And so they're trying to engender the more Islamist population there the fighters, their families, and those other people who are there. And so I think the long game is Turkey might be looking to increase its territory, maybe not immediately, but possibly in 10, 20, 30 years. And then domestically, President Erdogan's a bit like Trump. Make Turkey great again. Bring back the Ottoman Empire, the new Turkey. And so think of Erdogan like a Trump. So everything he's doing militarily here, it's reverberating back politically in Turkey, domestically. And so he's also transitioning the country from a secular government to an Islamist government. This is something that doesn't get any coverage in the United States because most Americans don't read Turkish media, and they don't. It's too far for most mainstream journalists.
And
to
let me
really
just stop you.
understand
You could
this.
highlight that with the fact that they're actually using Uyghur Chinese children in their forces, and that's getting zero coverage. I was kind of shocked to see that. But again, most people in the United States have no idea what this map looks like. They don't understand that Syria, geographically is a much smaller country. They are engulfed by our quote-unquote allies, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, where we have, many, many military bases. And of course, Turkey now coming in from this region right here, like you just said. We are, drone bombing Yemen. We have AFRICOM going on here in the Sudan and Somalia, this entire region. Here's Afghanistan, which we're in, Pakistan, our ally. They're literally surrounded, and their only large ally is Russia right here and China all the way back here where they'd have to get in through. It kind of shocked me how many Uyghur children I'm seeing in these things. Do you think that's because of the persecution by the Chinese government, that they're just figuring, hey, let's make an exodus here, at least we can fight?
Yeah, the Uyghurs from Western China, from Xinjiang province, they're members of what's called the Islamic Turkestan Party. And the Turkish government has been facilitating their transit from Western China legally, issuing them passports upon arrival in Turkey. The ethnic Turk, or the Greater Turkey, does recognize them as of Turkish, or as Turks, as Greater Turks. Okay, so there's a bit of synergy there, but they're really just convenient foreign fighters in this case. They've been in Idlib in the tens of thousands. They've then brought their families. They have whole villages, Uyghur villages, with their own compounds, with their the mothers, the children, and some of these kids who came as children, or they're young men now. This is a 10-year conflict, and so this is the problem. And you also have Tajik, Central Asian, Uzbeks, Afghans. There's a Taliban as well in Idlib as well. So along with Dagestani and other, Central Asian militants, basically. And so, this is not a civil war in a traditional sense. This is an internationalized proxy war and a civil war at the same time. So it's a lot of foreign powers, are from the Gulf to the U.S. to Britain to the NATO member states to Turkey, have played a dedicated role in keeping this conflict and destabilizing Syria now for going on 10 years. And they're blaming the government in Damascus, blaming Putin and Moscow for this civil war. Assad's killed 500,000 of his own people, which is a complete lie. But
Patrick,
that number grows every month. They just add 100,000.
Let's talk about that, because you made some really good points about the fact that make Turkey great again, make America great again, and I would also add make Israel great again, because if you see those three nation states, especially in this time period of the Trump administration, it's been essentially do whatever militarily we liked. The expansion in Israel, Turkey coming in, and no matter what rhetoric Trump wants to give you, right? We have more drone bombs under his administration than we did the previous administration, and he hasn't even been in there 4 years. That's something I brought up to the InfoWars crew after the fact, after that First Amendment conference, and said, I really don't know how you can say like this isn't a war precedent. You may not see it, but it's there. And especially in the fact that you just talked about Russian propaganda and, Assad's terrible. with the OPCW leaks, that was a great chance for this administration to come clean, say, hey, we were wrong. There was no attack here. I wanted to get out previously. I was talking about getting out of Syria. I was duped. Instead, during these hearings, they doubled down and said, this is Russian propaganda you're hearing. These attacks happened. And they kind of just, the guy didn't even call himself a whistleblower, Patrick. He said, I'm not a whistleblower. I've worked for the OPCW for so long. This is what happened. And for those to be facilitated through WikiLeaks and essentially have almost an entire blackout about this information in the alternative media is disgusting, because don't we have to hold the Trump administration accountable when an actual false flag occurs, is exposed, and they double down on the Russian propaganda?
Yeah, Trump has been duped twice in Syria. He was duped in April of 2017 with Khan Shaykhun. This was claimed to be a sarin attack, but the evidence doesn't suggest that at all. In fact, when Duma eventually gets wrapped up, hopefully, people will then move on to look at Khan Shaykhun a bit closer, because there's absolutely nothing there in terms of real evidence, and the same amount of fakery that we saw in Duma, which was backed up by the findings of the OPCW's on-the-ground fact-finding mission, which the executive of the OPCW suppressed in their final report. That was the whole point of the OPCW leaks. So Trump was then duped in April of 2018, a year later, with the same sort of thing, chemical attack, sarin, chlorine. All the media reports were sarin at Duma. And of course, no sarin was found on site, no chlorine as well, nothing above household levels, really. So Trump was duped again. Trump was also duped in the same way with the Skripal incident. We had the earlier reports where the CIA or one of Gina Haspel's henchmen, or maybe herself, showed the president pictures of dead ducks in Salisbury. That turned out to be fake. So this story was then buried soon after that was released. Embarrassing, of course. But so we do see Trump, and his daughter was also involved in, apparently, we're told, in the decision making of Khan Shaykhun, the beautiful babies, quote as well. So you have a president that's very easily manipulated by false flags, fakery, staged events, and will launch a strike, a military strike against a country based on no evidence whatsoever.
And you know what? Let's talk about fake evidence, because that kind of gets us into Assange, and you've been covering that all week there. The revelations from the lawyers essentially are that this guy Grenell was the one who is now the intel chief, is the one that wrote this indictment up, the 17 parts under the Espionage Act, and then one more count. Now, Cassandra Fairbanks has leaked audio of her and Arthur Schwartz, who is an assistant to Grenell, where he says essentially that it was on behalf of the fucking president. And we interviewed Cassandra, and she told a story that in order to get Trump to sign off on the Chelsea Manning offense, because they didn't want to use Vault 7 and they didn't want to use the DNC links, that they actually showed both Trump and Don Jr. photographs of children being tortured due to the Manning leaks and other horrific things. Now, this was after that First Amendment conference. I've got to clean up the audio. It is currently on my YouTube channel. Now, if that's the case, they've been duped again, and this time to kill the First Amendment once and for all and put a chilling effect into all of press, because he also signed off on the National Counterintelligence 2020 to 2022 strategy. I'm not sure if you've seen that document. It's been out about 2.5 weeks. He literally buys into the Russian meddling in elections in the opening paragraph of him endorsing this thing. And then in the same breath, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Iran, hacktivists, leaktivists, and of course, public disclosure organizations are lumped into one anti-U.S. interest group that can be stopped through the national security apparatus. This is a huge issue. We now have a president that has been so manipulated by the deep state, it appears they'd rather have him in for another 4 years than anybody else they can promote on the other side, because it's going so well militarily. With all that being said, why then are we seeing today a peace deal with the Taliban? Is that smoke and mirrors?
Well, there's an election coming up, so certainly this looks good on Trump's election resume, that he finally wound down the war in Afghanistan. And one has to wonder, if there wasn't an election this year, let's say the election was in 2022, that they would not. I don't think he would be announcing drawdown of troops in Afghanistan. By the way, this is a 12-month drawdown. So if Trump is reelected, I wouldn't be surprised if you'll see fighting flaring up magically in around Kabul, and then we need to redeploy another 5,000 and et cetera. NATO might also, carry some of the weight there, or the EU unified forces possibly might deploy a battle group, because the European military unification is also coming online to replace, which may replace NATO. And that's a big issue that's brewing in Europe that a lot of people, of course, don't talk much about. Although it became an issue in the run-up to Brexit. Nigel Farage was also talking about that. Britain had opted in initially to the EU army, let's call it, is a colloquial term. But then through Brexit, as the issue got raised, mainly by the UK Column, which is an independent UK media outlet, who I also present the news on Fridays, Britain has seemed to back out, or appearing to opt out for the moment, of EU military unification. But Afghanistan will be a perfect theater for that. So Trump is electioneering in that sense. I'm worried that in terms of all those things that you just flagged up with regards to the intelligence report, Republicans are generally clueless about anything outside of U.S. shores. As a general rule, politically, they're very canny domestically, very canny with the economy and so forth. But when it comes to international, generally clueless. Democrats tend to be more canny on international affairs, not always in a good way, as we found out from the Obama administration, but generally clueless on the economy and a lot of domestic politics as well. Tend to rely on identity politics and emotive issues. So that's the schism in America. So Trump is the perfect vehicle for America's global fascism, economic warfare, sanctions against everybody, even your allies. And this is going to have massive ramifications for the Trump administration in a second term. And it means that you can only wage economic warfare for so long before it becomes a real problem for your enemies and your allies as well. And before it causes tension that could lead to economic tension, strangling countries, sabotaging gas pipelines, which the U.S. is doing between Germany and Russia, putting pressure on countries, currency warfare against even Turkey was a target of U.S. economic warfare in the last 12 months. So China as well, the United States is posturing against China. It's posturing against just about everybody that's thinking about buying Russian missile defense systems, or not buying U.S. products, or going off the reservation of U.S. military cooperation. And so the U.S. is trying to manage the sunset of its empire. And so this is very dangerous with a president like Trump, because the record shows that he's not really playing 5D chess as his supporters might want to believe he is. He is being absolutely managed and cajoled into a corner to do exactly what the Pentagon, what the intelligence agencies, what the real seats of power in America, what they want. And this is what Trump's a perfect vehicle for this. They'll allow him to run a populist agenda domestically to a certain degree, but there's certain things that he can't. He doesn't appear to understand or to have any interest at all in. So it's a perfect opportunity to run rampant for certain elements of the U.S. permanent state.
I couldn't agree more. And let's talk about that permanent state a little bit, because it looks like they're going to extradite this guy. I don't know how they don't. You were on the ground. You were talking to people, but let's look at the facts, right?
I was in the court. I was in the court all week.
Yeah, all week. And I actually watched some of your outdoors thing where you said, I think my favorite quote was, as we're at the main event and the bullshit starts to crumble, everybody's wondering why the prosecution isn't well prepared. And you're like, 'cause it's a kangaroo court. This isn't a real court. We've already had the queen step up and say she's not going to do anything. No surprise there. The only surprise is to the people that think that she has no power and that she couldn't do anything if she wanted to. She could. Jeremy Corbyn brings up in Parliament, Boris Johnson, will you deny extradition if it's ruled that he goes? He, of course, refused to answer that question and said he'd stand up for the freedom of the press. But we all know that's bullshit. He's one of these Oxford guys that's not only establishment, but kind of buddy-buddy with Trump in this empire-building phase. So if this happens, if not only does he get extradited at the end, but survives all this in Belmarsh and comes to the United States for 100% show trial, because that's what it is. You can't step into a courtroom where they have 100% conviction rate and say to me anything otherwise. So is that it? Is that just like for free speech in this country and the world?
The first thing I'll have to say, and what was made very clear by Julian Assange's defense team on the first 2 days of the hearing, particularly on Tuesday, they dismantled every single U.S. charge and indictment. It was embarrassing. It was, in sporting terms, a total blowout. 40-point victory at halftime in a playoff game. It was a blowout. Okay, they dismantled all of those accusations, including that sources or informants were put in danger from WikiLeaks releases. That wasn't the case at all. This is factually proven. This is all proven by publicly available material, and all of the other things in the indictments and accusations against Assange and via the Manning trial. It was all dismantled and debunked, basically. So this is all phony indictments, basically, and it's willful negligence on the part of the U.S. DOJ and the prosecution, because this is all available information. So based on this, the defense is making the argument of an abusive process, so that there's an ulterior motive. These are political indictments. They blatantly misrepresent the facts. Okay, so it's embarrassing when they were reading out. So the prosecution came up with a few small binders, and that's all they needed for this 1 week hearing. The defense had mountains and stacks of boxes, reading off and going line by line, one by one. The prosecution didn't feel they need to. They had a few very fundamental arguments regarding the extradition process, that the British, because it's not stated implicitly in the British law by a sovereign act of parliament, they should ignore international law, which says that you cannot extradite on political offense, and by definition, espionage is a political offense. So this is where the judge will rule either in favor of the defense or the prosecution on that basis. Is one of the fundamental bases of this hearing. And this court really doesn't have the jurisdiction maybe to interpret international law, although it could, but maybe the judge might cop out, and then it would then go to appeal to the High Court, possibly to the Supreme Court. As the appeal process goes, I think the chances of success for Julian Assange and his legal team, it increases exponentially. At this level of a court, it's got such a narrow remit. It's not a fair trial. He's in a glass box at the back of the court, can't speak to his lawyers. When they go to hear evidence and witnesses in May, and he's not able to sit next to his lawyers and have normal conversation, they asked for this. The judge flatly denied it. So this is not a fair trial on its face.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because this is a man who's never committed one violent act or charged with one violent act in his life. What they are charging him with would mean that he'd have to be alone with access to not only a computer but the internet, right? Which is an impossibility. And not only are they not treating him like a human being? It really reminded me the way they held the former Egyptian president who ended up dying in his glass box during a show trial that nobody really got insight on. The fact we're treating the guy like Hannibal fucking Lecter is completely shameful of the entire Western world to allow this, from the United States to the United Kingdom to the rest of Europe and to Australia, especially as it is their citizen. If there could be nothing else that shows that this is of a political nature, to not let the man speak to his own attorneys is undefensible. Indefensible, in my opinion, Patrick.
Not only that, but between Monday, end of session on Monday, they say like 4 o'clock, and the following morning, beginning of session on Tuesday, 10 a.m., he was moved into 5 different cells, handcuffed 11 times, strip searched twice, and this is the big one, had his personal documents, his privileged court papers, client attorney documents confiscated by prison guards who don't work for the prison. They work for Serco, which is an international conglomerate that runs the private prison industry along with G4S. Okay. So on so many levels, this is just wrong. And when challenged on some of these reports and situations, the judge, her answer was, I cannot be expected to rule on the conditions which Mr. Assange is being held or subject to. You have to take this up with the prison system. The judge is fully within her remit to rule on it because it has a direct effect on the trial, could end in a mistrial. Of course, it is, part of her responsibility to address problems like that. So the whole thing's you could see the fixes in on so many different levels. He's not going to get a fair hearing at this level. He might get a fair hearing at the high court level, but the entire process is completely corrupted on every level. And the prosecution is just doing their job, pushing the extradition order through prima facie, letter of the law, no interpretation. And then the defense is trying to knock all this back and just show all this precedent, saying that this is, this doesn't work on any level. Here are all the precedents. You're misrepresenting Julian Assange's situation. These are trumped up charges, etc. So he has a great defense team. I have to say, I was so impressed with the acumen, the thoroughness, and the gusto in which they made their case and stood up for their client. And Assange himself stood up for himself and shouted through the slits in the bulletproof glass at least twice on Thursday and on Wednesday as well. And so, he clearly is frustrated. He's not looking particularly well. He looked really worn down and dejected. Anybody else would in that sense. He's uncharged and he's unconvicted. He's being held in indefinite detention. Okay, no criminal record in the UK except for a bail skipping charge, which was based on an investigation that was dropped. There was no charge in Sweden even. It was only for questioning. Mm-hmm. So that bail order as well. I mean, he's being treated. Tommy Robinson got much better treatment. He got unlimited phone calls in the mornings, didn't miss any visits, time to see his lawyers. He was convicted for contempt. Okay. Julian Assange isn't convicted for anything, charged with nothing. And he's being put on ice. Okay. If everybody is not up in arms shouting about this in the press or the alternative media or whatever, then they don't really understand the significance of this case. They really don't care.
Yeah,
and
it is the issue.
And I don't think anybody in the White House cares either.
And you know what? Let's talk about that, because we talked about Grenell. We talked about really the Chelsea Manning information, somebody who had their sentence commuted and has now unjustly been held for over 300 days. Me and the Action for Assange crew were outside there last week. Are we going to find out more from these civil cases? For instance, it's only through these civil cases between the Rich family and Matt Couch, Butowski, and others that we know that Seymour Hersh's source for the Seth Rich investigation by the FBI is McCabe. And now, of course, we know McCabe's going to be charged with nothing. We know that both Aaron Rich and Matt Couch wanted depositions or testimony from Julian Assange, and the judge denied it. And he's a crony of Podesta. And of course, the mainstream media here didn't touch it. Matt Couch had to put it out on his Twitter for it even to be confirmed. And I'm not a Matt Couch guy, but when you have somebody suing somebody else and both of you want the testimony of Julian Assange for the justice system to step in and say no, you should realize the fix is in on many levels. So is there a better chance for us to get to the bottom of the DNC emails, why this is really occurring through civil court than even this, or possibly when this takes place in May, right? We're going to have to wait till May for this to come back. And I assume that from the opening argument, the first 28-page PDF that the defense team put out there, we're going to start seeing the likes of Noam Chomsky and other character witnesses that are listed in there. Do we still have a better shot at the truth from the American civil court system than the international system?
I don't hold out a lot of hope from the American civil court system at all. And when you have people suing people, I mean, there's about 4 different lawsuits going in different directions on this situation that you just said. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's just going to get mired in motions and filings and lawsuits and so forth. Countersuits.
Yeah, it's going to get Epstein to the point where we're going to wait years and years and years and years for all these things, and maybe they'll come out or maybe they won't.
Yeah, it's as far as the DNC leaks go, Julian Assange WikiLeaks has been adamant that it is not a state actor. Okay, it's definitely not. That rules out Russia. Other people are on record that it was that the source is an insider from the DNC. Now we don't know if it was for sure whether it was Seth Rich or somebody else, okay, or somebody else that we don't even know named right now. Mm-hmm. That's neither here nor there until you can prove that case. In a way, it's a massive red herring and a huge distraction, because the point is, if something is leaked and is given to a press outlet, the New York Times, the Boston Globe, whatever, it's not a scandal. This happens during elections seasons. Even Roger Stone, the trickster, the shyster extraordinaire, inquiring about when the next leaks are coming. They criminalized his inquiry and then his lying about it because it was WikiLeaks has been rebranded as a kind of a Kremlin asset, a hostile foreign intelligence service, and Julian Assange is a criminal. A cyber criminal and a Russian agent, basically, without, that's what they're inferring. Mm-hmm. So if you take away that and you say WikiLeaks is the New York Times, Julian Assange is Dean Baquet, the editor of the New York Times, and Stone's talking to Dean Baquet about when the leaks are coming from the New York Times, there's no scandal. Mm-hmm. There's no court cases. There's no lawsuits. There's no Mueller report. There's nothing. This is all. There's no indictments either. This has all been achieved by the change of the language, the relabeling of Assange and WikiLeaks from what they truly are to what they're trying to be recast as by the U.S. government, by the Trump administration, by Trump's DOJ.
When you move the goalpost to public disclosure organization, that's anybody that would publish a document. And, they talk about being ideologically motivated. I'm ideologically motivated. Hate to tell you guys, anybody that would be taking action is ideologically motivated. When you say the word leaktivist as it's a real thing, no, leakers were whistleblowers when corruption happened. They're actually not leaktivists. They're somebody that was in the system, saw something horrific, and decided, hey, something has to be done. A great example would be the OPCW workers. They tried to go through the proper channels. They basically were railroaded and had to go to what? A public disclosure organization to leak these documents. They're just making stuff up at this point. And when you can change the language so thoroughly, it makes really anybody that would speak out against an interest of the United States a hostile or foreign enemy under this new counterintelligence report. So I guess I'm going to close it with, what can we do about all this stuff that we're not already doing? Obviously, your website, 21st Century Wire is one of the most fearless and accurate websites, especially when we're talking about the Middle East, when we're talking about Assange, when we're talking about First Amendment issues, when we're talking about the global imperial state that we're in these regions via the Anglo-American, U.S., Israeli, Saudi empire at this point. I mean, that alliance to me in the Middle East is so destructive, and I hate to say it, but I feel like there's not much of a way out at this point because we're going to get another 4 years of this.
Well, whether it's Trump or Bernie Sanders, we're still going to get more of it. You know, Bernie Sanders would absolutely, you could see the Joint Chiefs standing around him, peering down at him, saying, Bernie, you've got to act. You have to act. This just happened today. We need to take action. There's people suffering. And Bernie shrugging his shoulders, saying, okay, I'll do it. You know, he will absolutely be cornered, like exactly the same way Trump has been cornered by the agencies, by the permanent state. Bernie Sanders will be absolutely cornered, and they'll have him in a headlock, and he'll do exactly as he's told. But you know, under a Democratic administration, it'll be responsibility to protect. It'll be human rights. These will be the clarion calls. These will be the mission. Under a Republican administration, it's more bombastic, it's more macho, in how they put out their foreign policy moves. Okay, mind you, Trump has been less aggressive in terms of starting new wars than Obama, but that's not really a great talking point because he's already managing all of the Obama disasters anyway. The U.S. is managing those and carrying them on in many ways. Okay, so it's not a great achievement by Trump to not starting new wars, quote unquote, but he hasn't de-escalated nearly to the level that he promised when he campaigned, and I don't think I don't know if he will in his second term either. It remains to be seen if he wins.
And you know what? I will give Bernie Sanders credit. He called Netanyahu a racist on television on those debates. I don't know another high-level candidate that would do that. But then again, at the same time, couldn't stand up to Hillary Clinton during 2016 when he obviously won. And when they were voting on the Yemen resolution, he agreed to the Israeli someone introduced an amendment to the bill that if it was in conjunction with Israel, they would go ahead and attack anyway. So really, even if Trump had not vetoed that bill, at any point, Israel could have said, hey, we're in on it, and then we would have done that same exact thing. 21st Century Wire is the website. You can follow him at 21 Wire. Patrick Henningsen, thank you so much for coming on, man. We got to do it more often. I know you're busy. You're on all sorts of things. You're on RT all the time. I know that you do a podcast. Where else can people find you regularly before you go?
Probably the most important outlet for us is every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have a radio show which goes live at 12 p.m. Eastern Time every Sunday called The Sunday Wire. You can catch it up at 21stcenturywire.com, and it immediately goes into podcasting format after the live broadcast. So that's probably the main venue if you want to get a full week's wrap up and get sort of the inside story and deeper analysis on all these stories. That's every Sunday. And also in the UK column.org live news, 1 p.m. GMT London time every Friday.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick. We got to do it more often, brother. So guys, you can follow me at Jason Burmis on Twitter. Thumbs this video up, subscribe, and share. Join the Burmis Brigade. Remember, all of my documentary films, Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order to Find, and Shade the Motion Picture are free right here. For $9.99 a month, you can get 5 extra videos every single week of a premium nature. We just put this Elise Stranahan video up there, along with many others that we're posting at Rockfin. You don't just get my material, you get Ben Askren, Graham Elwood, Ron Placone, and more. It's like a Netflix for creators, so for $9.99, it's not just me. And if you want to support me, $5, $10, $15, it means the world to me. Let me just read these couple of super chats that I got. Sandra Karen, thank you. Jason, love your work, love you. And Mr. Broken Oz, help us build a coalition of the living to save Julian and Chelsea and Jeremy's lives. Couldn't agree much more than that. I love you guys, and thank you so much. We will see you on the flip.